Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining the podcast. It's good to see you again.
Hey, Ben, thank you for hosting it. We'd love to be here.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. So we met a little over a year ago. We were starting to look at the AI governance space. And so I pinged you on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Rehan, what are you guys doing?" And we had a nice chat. We got to meet at RSA. Been really impressed with, how you guys are maturing the company and, right in the sweet spot of everything that everyone wants to talk about. So I'm excited about this one. AI, data governance, data management, security, and you cut across a lot of categories. So I'm looking forward to our chat here today.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I think this is a whole
There is.
wave of AI going on, and I think data, particularly in the enterprise, proprietary data is at the center of enabling and creating value. So there's a lot you've learned and a lot there to be learned.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get into that. But first, I want to start with your career and how you got into founding companies and leading companies. I think everyone has a different path, so I'd love to hear about your own experience. What was your first job? What was your first company you founded? And take us through your kind of background.
But I'll say that instead of founding companies as an aspiration, I think the aspiration from very early on was actually building something of value, whether it's a company or a product, right? When you're in school, it dates all the way back to perhaps I was like a freshman in college, where, I mean, part of the reason I came to an engineering school was this desire to actually, build things, truly something which can actually be valuable. So if you were to ask me about, when did you start? It would literally, I would say, like freshman college. That's where the first time when we, along with one of my close friends, when we tried to build something to what was at that point very first virus that was created for, I'm dating myself, it was DOS. For DOS, it was a virus created called C-Brain, and we looked to basically build something to call like anti-brain, which is the antivirus. One of the very first antiviruses. This is the time when Symantec and McAfee and all didn't exist, right? That's how I think the journey, I would say, started. So quite an experience while in the college, build a product, try to sell it, and not being successful actually selling the product, but the product was amazing. That's how it all started. But of course, the realization from there on that you actually have to go on a journey. If you're trying to build something of value, you have to learn a lot in terms of the full cycle of not just building a product, but how to actually take it to global markets. And that's where, company building kind of learning is going to come through. That's how it all started, I would say.
Nice. So first job. Was it your first job ever when you started a company, or did you have a job before that?
I did start. I went to grad school, and the very first job was very lucky. The story goes that I went to in Midwest to Purdue, and I actually really didn't fully understand the power of Silicon Valley and what really Silicon Valley is. It was just sheer coincidence that I landed here because we used to work on Sun Microsystems machines. They were amazing machines, and I interviewed there for building or helping to build some of the earliest GPUs that Sun was trying to build. And I was an engineer as hired in that team, and very lucky that brought me to Silicon Valley. Number one, brought me to actually work with some of the most talented people, trying to basically build completely something different and new for throughput processing and GPUs that would go in as a co-processor in the Sun machines. That's how it started. A lot of learning. But once you come to Silicon Valley, you realize that it's a bit unbounded in that fashion, that if you have ideas and if you can actually burn the midnight oil, and if you have, if you can organize things, then you can actually do some things more meaningful in some ways. So I left Sun Microsystems within 3 years, and then joined a much smaller company to learn, essentially. To learn basically the breadth of what you could do in a smaller company as compared to a large company. And that's frankly, that was a company that was building wireless systems, and they had to build everything on their own, from silicon to boards to antennas to radios to everything. And you got to learn a lot.
No cloud yet. Right? No cloud.
We used to call it something different. It was called grid computing. So we had to build our own because the thing in that company was it was quite interesting, because when you're building silicon, you only get one shot. You can burn more money to get tape outs again and again, but you get one shot to tape it out and then it has to work. So you have to emulate that silicon. So we literally build our own like grid computing, because literally everyone's PC machines would be utilized at night when people are gone, because their laptops are not even as popular at that time, right? So everyone had a desktop. At night, those machines will be churning and emulating, your silicon. If it would perform, and you'll test it, and you'll do this for not one day. You'll do this over months, and to see your silicon is going to be, when it comes out, it's going to actually perform, and it's going to not have bugs. And that's, we called it grid computing. And now it's the same concept you take in cloud and offer to others. It was literally like that. And after that, we started Vicorus, which was a 4G infrastructure company. The thesis was that if you, this is the times when you actually had high-speed landline connections, were very high speed, but there was nothing which was wireless. Now we feel like you actually can have the entire internet in your pocket. At that time, it was like very little internet connectivity. So the concept was that you can, on the back end of your wireless networks, you need systems that can manage traffic, that can manage applications, that can manage billing and all that. It's called packet core. And we built a packet core company, which was for 4G, which was called Vicorus. And that was the very first time it was like, go raise money, and then build something from scratch. It was also, if you look at it right back in the day, we had to build our own like FPGAs, our own boards, our own chassis, our hardware, and the entire software stack that goes above it, and the management plane that goes above it, right? So it was like a full system you actually had to build, which was quite a learning along the way. The company became successful. We deployed one of the very first 4G networks in LA with Clearwire at that point in time, and then the company got acquired. And then after that, there's another company that was started, which was the point of view there was that with the SaaS and SaaS applications coming in, just like now AI is coming in, the SaaS was new. People used to build their own data centers, keep the data with them. And at that point in time, people were trying to bring the SaaS applications, and the usage model was changing. The usage model was that people from anywhere could just log into a SaaS application and do the work. So the whole notion of a security stack that existed before it, that you will secure your data center, people will come to office and your security stack is actually in your office or your own data centers, this will disrupt it, right? That was the thought process. And we started Elastica. And Elastica's, the notion was that you need basically security in the cloud for the cloud, right? There was called CASB, term got coined, which Elastica and a few other companies were the pioneers in it. And the company became quite successful, for technology-wise, became kind of a leader, in its own space. And then we merged with Blue Code at that point in time, because Blue Code was looking to go public, and this would actually help Blue Code go public, and it also will help accelerate adoption of our own technology. And of course, as you know, history goes that Blue Code filed to go public, and Symantec acquired it for $5 billion. And so we ended up in Symantec, where I ran cloud security business. The team that lucky to actually have a team like that also ran alongside with that cloud security business over there. And it's pretty much the same team that started at this point Security.ai just before COVID started. And the notion at Security.ai was that data is the center of everything. People need multiple different kind of controls. And controls could be privacy, could be security, could be governance, could be anything. And you need to rethink through, instead of having a mess of point solutions and in siloed offerings, could you actually do one unified way of actually looking at your data and then controlling the data? That's how the journey kind of went from the college project in freshman year to all the way to where we are. And the one thing which is, I'll say as a summary, is that the thing that really enabled is the like-minded people that I've been very blessed to actually have, and to be working with some amazing team members through the journey over different companies. And Securiti is special in that sense. The team here is very special.
Yeah, I want to come back to everything you kind of just said around those different shifts in the market, but back to what you just said, you were a founder at one point, sitting at maybe a coffee table with some friends, and maybe you were next to another set of people who were pitching an investor, and you're like, "Hey, I could do that," right? And then you kind of went down the path of learning. I think that's so important, right? Like whatever you do in life with your job, like just learn, right? Be curious. You'll find a path. Whether you become the CEO or you become a VP or a director or you're an engineer, just learn. I think that's a beauty of our industry, right? But how has Silicon Valley changed since you've been there, right? You talked a little about grid computing, right? You used to have to literally build the whole stack. Now you can literally, after this call, go on the internet, download the 12 things that you need, patch them together, and then go to a VC and go pitch them on what what business value you're going to provide to the customer and the VC. So like has it gotten easier to raise money? Has it gotten harder? If you had to kind of step back into the initial founder shoes, or maybe first founder shoes, like what advice would you have to that founder? Is it easier to raise money now? Harder to raise money? Has the bar gone up? Like, is it hard to hire engineers now? Like, what's kind of your perspective? Because you've now done this a bunch of times. You've been successful, so people will take your call. But what was that experience like, and how would you kind of compare that to now?
I think it's about access to capital, right? So back in the day, you didn't have that many VCs, very few. Even to get a meeting, people would celebrate if you get a meeting, right? So
Yeah.
it was
I've
like
done that.
the dynamics were very different. Dynamics
Yeah.
were totally different at that point in time. So when you're raising money, there are a few set of respectable VCs you would want to actually work with, that you would want to be working with. And the choices outside of that was like a very quick drop off, and you don't have. And if you, in contrast, if you do it right now, the amount, VC is another like a form of investment that big LPs and they do. The amount of money that is into this high risk capital that has funneled in, and the number of VCs and the different stages, the way it has, seed stage and large seed stage, and then all the way down to crossover
Pre-seed
fund.
stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Pre-seed stage.
A lot of angels, which you can give it whichever name.
That's right. That's right.
So the access to capital actually has become more options, I would say. It's never easier because people who are investing capital, I think hopefully they're making wise decisions, which means they should be doing all kinds of diligence on it. But the number of options and the amount of capital has gone dramatically very different as compared to 15 years back or 20 years back, right? And that's good and bad, what it does. I would say it's good because if you're building something meaningful, you need to raise a lot more capital. You will actually, you have options. And it's bad because you will actually have a lot of companies that will get funded even in your own area. So when they're good, a lot of competition. So and bad not in the sense that competition is in some ways for the end consumer. It's still good,
Sure.
but not all VCs are equal either. So which means if everyone is trying to go and invest in a certain area, you'll have list of companies in your area which are not equal either. There are some really good companies, and there could be tail of 10, 15 companies which are just there, noise. And in technology, as you know, the winner, the top one or two winners take most of the market, right? So if you are not in that segment, then actually it's just not good actually to be operating in those segments, right? So if you are going into a market and you're going to offer some value, you have to shoot to be in the top, right? Technology wise, execution wise, GTM wise, you actually, not just product, but all of it, You have to shoot that you can actually execute to among the best. If you do that right, then you actually have global markets. You need a lot more capital. So in that sense, if you can execute very well, and if you have the products to be actually to stand out, and the market is global, frankly, the amount of capital that you can get right now was not possible to that level before. Not easily possible. I shouldn't be saying possible. It was possible. It was much more difficult. That's how it has changed. So you have, and then all these sovereign funds that you're seeing now, all different sovereign funds across the globe, whether it is, whether it's Middle East, whether it is Singapore, they also want to be participating in these waves. So it is, for good companies, it's great news, I would say.
Nice. Yeah, I think you make a good point about, access to capital, the amount of noise in the market for customers and for competition, the ability to execute, right? I think I'm sure you've worked on this. Like, you talk to lots of people who have great technology, great ideas. Execution is the hardest thing, right?
Yeah.
It is always the hardest thing. So thanks for sharing that, Ryan. I guess before we kind of get into security, you mentioned you worked on 4G, and then you went to cloud security / CASB, then you went to data. You could have just stuck in the wireless space and done LTE and 5G, and I don't even know, what do we have, like 10G now? No, I'm just kidding. I think we have 6G coming. But Wi-Fi 7, like all that stuff. You could have just gone deeper into that and just owned that space because you were clearly good at it. Then you had success in cloud security and CASB, which is still a thing now, that everyone is still trying to figure out how to do. And there's big companies like Zscaler and other companies that have kind of built a big market out of that. And this is after that, when you did that, and now data. So why skip around? And why are you so focused on the data problem? Because this thing has existed for a long time, right? And this is before Gen AI. So, like, how did you end up kind of in this market?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. So let's first understand from 4G packet core, which is also data, like backend data management, kind of not data management, traffic management, I should be saying, issue versus CASB. In our packet core, we were doing deep packet inspection. So we had to analyze the traffic, pretty much like what a firewall does, but for different purpose for the telcos, right? Where remember, these pipes are very, very bandwidth limited at that point in time. They want to make sure, and Skype and all these things are not taking over. So they want to control when they're giving somebody internet, how it's utilized. So the role of the packet core was to understand the traffic on the fly and make rules, and then stop certain traffic or throttle certain traffic. And that was one of the differentiating features of the packet core that we built at Vicors. Now, that expertise, you can think, is also security expertise, because on the fly, you're inspecting the traffic. And then you, instead of doing for traffic control, you're doing it for security purposes. And that portable skill set from learnings from Vicors, we try to apply it in CASB, because CASB also, there is a gateway function that you can say the traffic is going to, Salesforce, and what kind of things can happen. Of course, CASB expanded, and we were literally the very first ones that we did API-based. We launched the gateway first, and then we did the API-based. So there was a bridge to these two. They may look completely like 4G to cloud security, like how the jump happens, but it was a portability of expertise, an application to a real new problem, which is a much bigger market in our view. When you build wireless technologies, you have a limited number of customers. There are like 100 telcos out there, and so concentration of power is with the customer, because they're only like, every country has only 5, 4 or 5.
That's right. Yeah.
So and if you're not in there, and the sales cycles are even longer. So the deal sizes are big whale deals. What I really want to see is that, so even if you build something really impressive, the value creation is going through a telco, right? So I think the thought process was that you have hundreds of thousands of enterprises, maybe millions of enterprises globally. Can we take this thing and apply it to some problem which millions of enterprises or companies could be utilizing? That's why Elastica was what Elastica was, right? Why it was to take the expertise and apply to a different market, right? Now, what we learned as a team at Symantec was that the data is the center of everything. The people call it data center, is the data protection and data security and data breaches. Like everyone wants to, all the security infrastructure that you're putting in, either is to try to protect your data, or of course not to get taken over, your infrastructure gets misused and all. It's literally trying, at the center of it is ground jewel is the data, right? And yes, you have to put the security above it also, all the way to all different devices and infrastructure and all, but you're trying to protect your data. And the realization, there were like over 3,000 customers for generally for cloud security, and Symantec had access to all kinds of large customers. The learning was that you actually have a desire to actually have much more comprehensive understanding and controls on data. People were building separate tools. They were data privacy tools, their data security tools, their DLP tools, their data governance tools, their compliance tools. And it was very obvious in my mind at that point in time that this is like so messed up. And oftentimes when GDPR and these things came along, this is back in 2018, when we were still at Symantec, people were doing checkmark exercises to say, I'm compliant.
That's right.
Literally.
Yeah.
Checkmark exercises to say I'm compliant, and underneath, data is doing what it's doing, is getting misused, and is going all different places. And you got basically a certification from somebody who say, I'm compliant. And that felt like, it's an opportunity for people to do the right thing. They were not able to do it. They were doing just check marks, and still many of them do just check marks because they didn't have tooling to automate it. They didn't know what's going on. And we saw an opportunity to say, can we build a framework, a platform? Now we call it Data Command Center. That Data Command Center is command on all kinds of visibility and all kinds of controls on data, and apply AI to it. If you look at in 2020, we won the Best of RSA award, like Best Company of RSA in their startup competition. If you look at it, the thesis there was that you want to apply AI to data and derive value and understand what data is where, and then have created what we call OT, the bot. Now we call it agents. People call them agents, that you can actually literally communicate to your data in natural language. And we did this demo in 2020 using some bunch of AI and techniques, whatever they were, state of the art at that time, to actually show in natural language you can communicate with your systems to find your privacy issues, your data issues, your compliance issues, and this, what we call OT the bot, which is now people call it AI agent, would actually tell you what's going on, and you'll take care of it for you, right? That's what we launched in 2020 at RSA and got Best of the RSA award. And that's the way we kind of came into this market. And of course, if you fast forward that to 2 years back in 2022, the whole thing around ChatGPT opened the minds of people that what is the true power of data at the end of the day. And what we are very lucky, I will say, that we are in this position because we started this thing much earlier to build a framework to get you visibility and controls and ability to use your data safely. It became very relevant, much more so relevant when people's eyes opened up to say, there could be some very powerful AI models that if you bring into our own data, that we can apply, value out of it. Why this is special, I'll say. Before the whole large language model kind of a revolution, people were very much trying to derive value from their structured data, right? These are BI tools. You can create charts and graphs and maybe more natural language above it. 95% of data in companies, up to 95% is unstructured, not used. Only humans could read it. They could understand what's inside it and do something with it. What changed the game is that unstructured data is not going to be utilized and the value can be extracted, and you can combine it with structured data to do magic with it, right? So Data Command Center that got built became very, very much like irrelevant, much more so, I would say, as compared to before that, right? Before that, definitely it was good business, but after it is time. Now it's like at the heart of AI revolution in the enterprise. You need that access to this data. You need the ways to make sure that the data is used safely. You need to make sure you have full visibility monitoring of every AI agent that you're trying to bring in to the company directly by yourself or through a SaaS application. You have full visibility on what data it is touching. Is it allowed? When somebody asks a question, do they get answers from their own data, or in the company they're getting data from the CEO's data? Like, how do you ensure all of that? It has become like a centerpiece, and frankly, in some ways, an impediment to actually growth of the AI in the enterprise. So we're seeing that right now, that this platform is becoming like an enabler to streamline things, and then you can turn on your Copilot, Microsoft Copilot. You can bring your own agent, and then a full visibility in there. That's the journey, I would say.
Yeah, so I liked your comment about the, going from telco customer to lots of customers, which was the kind of 4G to the CASB. But then as you were working through the CASB problem, you realized that there's all these tooling problems, right? And that is that's a problem across every industry. In technology, security, I think, is probably the worst, because to your point, there's a lot of fresh powder and there's a lot of money getting thrown at it, and everyone's building all these little tools, and there's nothing that's actually governing, managing. We can have a whole nother conversation about security tooling, and how customers can have one security strategy versus 50 or 50 tools.
Right.
But what was interesting to hear you say kind of about the CASB to data thing was, the checkbox thing, the tooling was something that people weren't actually getting value out of. I think the other thing is you seem to be catching on these markets much earlier versus trying to go build another CASB and now compete with all these companies. Like, you essentially entered in a new market, which, to your earlier point, you don't want to have a lot of competition, because then you can get ahead of the smaller amount of competition when everyone catches up, because everyone is talking about what you just said, right? So you kind of got ahead of it. Maybe talk a little bit about how you worked with customers and the types of customers you worked with who were receptive to this, and how you see customers maturing with this problem. Maybe talk us kind of through the types of customers you worked with in 2020 versus what you're seeing now, and how customers are kind of thinking a little differently. Like you said, like, maybe we shouldn't checkbox this anymore. I know it's an AI thing, but like, they're changing their whole business for this stuff. Like, that's a pretty
Absolutely.
dramatic thing. And you guys, clearly picked a good spot.
I think I'll tell you a story about Elastica. So Elastic, you come with the concept, and you go to your first customers to validate it, that you're not just smoking. And Elastica, the concept was security for SaaS, like SaaS application data and SaaS we're going to secure. And I went to CIOs and CISOs to just validate it's going to be like something they would buy. Very early days, like of Elastica. And many of them smiled at me, so like, SaaS? What SaaS? We don't even have SaaS, and you're talking about SaaS and then security audit. Like, you're building for something which we don't even have. This is back in 2013, right? 2012.
Okay, well, SaaS definitely existed then, but yes, go ahead.
Adoption wasn't there. Adoption wasn't
fair
there.
Enough.
Very few things were getting adopted, and Microsoft SharePoint wasn't there online. People have data on premise, most of it, right? There were some leading companies, small leading companies like Dropbox and Box were popping up.
Right.
But exactly. It wasn't like a mainstream thing. Salesforce was there. And most of the time we got told, well, this is actually not a problem for us because we don't have much SaaS. And now you're talking about something, security above it. So go look and do something else. But I think the conviction was that that's the way the world is going to go. And you take a bet. That's the way the world is going to go, right? And I do have to say, the first 1-2 years was like, it was a gut check. Well, is this really going to be a market?
A lot of cold coffee and ramen.
Yeah, exactly, and sleepless nights. Like, you're building something you don't know the market exists, right? And but we got lucky. How? Because Microsoft Google came, And Google said, Google came with their all Google suite very early. And then Microsoft turned around and said, well, that's the way it's going to be. And then like floodgates open up for CASB, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're gonna turn on Google in the enterprise or Microsoft in the enterprise, you gotta have this thing, right? Security for the SaaS applications. So that's all like the market timing. Yes, we were early, but by the time our product got in and got matured a little bit, the market took off, right? Completely. And then here, I would say a bit the same. We started with the view that data is the center of everything. Unstructured data is the really important, and we built a platform much more so than what CASB was. CASB was only SaaS. The aspiration actually came from CASB. CASB was in SaaS. We started to talk to customers, large customers, and even today, I can tell you, man, like you know it, a lot of large companies' data is still on-prem. And we thought that we're doing just a sliver of the job by doing CASB. Why would you not go after data in the public clouds, which is going to migrate, and more data is going to public cloud. More data will be generated, which CASB was not doing. CASB was SaaS applications. And then on-premise is still a lot of data on-premise. So can we build a platform that cuts across? That was literally the thesis of it. Now, in the early days, the use cases were and still are very much tied to security of data, privacy of data, governance of data, and drivers were pure those particular pillars. Now, what we're seeing is a bit brand new wind behind it is that the CEO and board mandate is we got to adopt agentic AI or AI into the company. The very first thing is, can we even turn it on?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a few customers, right? And this is a real story. I mean, one of our customers, they turned on Microsoft Copilot for 200 people in the company. This company has tens of thousands of employees. And they turned it off the next week. Because even among 200 people, these were executives, somebody was trying to impress the executives, they could see each other's information. They would ask questions, they'd get answer from somebody else's data. They turned it off.
That's a good way to break down the silos, Rehan. Like that's like a good executive icebreaker activity. So
full transparency.
Anyways, continue. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, as long as you don't see this, CFO's salary
That's right.
information. So I think the realization even for that company was that even to turn on as simple a thing as Microsoft Copilot, you got to first make sure your controls are in place and people are not going to start seeing each other's data. Your access is probably governed, your posture is right. And even for a simple thing as turning on in one SaaS application like Microsoft SharePoint, Microsoft Teams or some things like that. And now if you take it to all other applications, Google and all kinds of applications, same issue. So the drivers now are, I actually genuinely need controls because paper exercise isn't going to cut it. It's not because I have to do some access governance compliance audit and I'm going to get it. If you make a mistake now, it's going to show. And in a bad way, it's going to show inside the company. It may not be that a breach happens outside the company. It's going to show. So generally, we're seeing projects where people want to make sure they understand unstructured, structured data across systems. They want to make sure they have provable controls on them in place. And it's not a one-time exercise. It's not you can come, bring and do it in one time. Data keeps changing. Your employees keep changing. Their roles keep changing. It's a river. It changes all the time. So, which means you need more automated tooling to make sure that while your agentic AI and copilots and AI is above data is operating, your controls are always there to actually make sure that there is no mess is going to happen, and they need visibility. And from above it, of course, new kind of compliance is now popping up. You have EOI Act, you have NIST RMF. Can you prove it also at the same time that if third-party auditor is asking that are you doing these things, you can actually automated way can prove it. That's the market, I would say, has dramatically kind of expanded as compared to even 3 years back.
So I guess what are most customers, in your experience when you talk to most customers, have they all tried something and maybe it didn't work the way they wanted, or are you still coming in contact with customers who have wanted to do it but they're worried about those things, Or they didn't really need to
more
do
than
it.
that.
Like, hey, like I really don't care. Like I'm gonna let everyone figure it out and figure out where all the speed bumps are, and I'm gonna be a laggard, and I'm just gonna wait. Because like I have a $5 billion business. I'm in a market where I own it. Like I'm not competing with lots of companies. Who cares? What's kind of your experience as well?
Yeah, I think so. We did actually a survey with some chief data officers of the marquee companies, and only 5% have adopted, even less than 5% adopted Microsoft Copilot.
Adopted, like tried
Among
it,
that
or
group,
adopted it and like
adopted.
productionalized it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, production-wise. Tried, everyone is trying.
Okay.
Everyone has
Yep.
some E5 license, everyone is trying, right? But to go to actually an adoption phase where people are starting to use, it was very small fraction. Of course, in our own sample data set, right? We don't
Yep.
have like all the data.
Yep.
And the reason is very simple. It was like CISO and CDOs, they really want to ask this right question, because it's not going to impact my business. If the all the intended controls that people really want inside the organization, if AI violates it, and now you're talking about automation on top of it also, the AI will act on it. If it access to it,
Mhm.
I will act something on it.
Yep.
It is actually operational disruption, even from
Yep.
HR lens, and also from actually your operational lens. It's an operational disruption that you can actually have. And if
Mhm.
something malicious come through with it, whether insider or outsider, they do not want to deal with any of that. So you're seeing this is actually a blocker for adoption of AI. And if we can facilitate that and be an enabler for it, I think that's very inspiring.
Mm. So you mentioned Microsoft a lot. Is that where you kind of see a lot of customers starting because they kind of already have Microsoft pushing it hard? Like that's kind of where most customers are starting with some type of like Copilot on Teams or something, or what else are you seeing the customers are kind of getting involved in, where they're again running into that problem because they kind of hope that ISV had actually solved that problem so they could use it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think Microsoft, because like it's everywhere. So,
Yep,
and all large companies have Microsoft, and Microsoft is a GTA machine. So
they
of
are a
course
machine.
they're pushing it through the packaging of
Hmm.
E5 licensing, and plus the
Hmm.
Copilot and all. So I think
Hmm.
they absolutely. So that becomes like it everywhere. There is a desire to turn this thing on, and it has value. I mean, if you can do
Hmm.
it right, there's a ton of value you can actually derive out of it. But Microsoft is definitely not the only one. Like you can pretty much pick any domain, and agentic AI or a Copilot, whatever you want to call it, those applications actually want to do the same, where
Mm.
they're trying to automate the stuff. Now, of course, there are certain applications in which you actually have a lot more data for every employee. It is highly unstructured. The mess could be even more dramatic if you actually do
Mm.
if you don't do it right. Whether it's Google, whether it's Box, or whether it is some of these applications out there, right? So, but the interesting part is that this is just the inception of the journey. So, certain AI
Yep.
people are trying to adopt through their eyes, through their vendor, through their
Right.
SaaS vendor, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Certain AI they're trying to build themselves. It's within
Hmm.
their own companies
Yep.
operations, or within their own applications that they have. They're trying to build that in order to embed the security and visibility as part of it. So if you're familiar with OWASP top 10 for LLMs, is fundamentally the journey starts with access to data, cleaning of data, then what models can be used, what is model generating, what is a user able to ask a question from these models. The entire stack with the journey of data is journey of AI is with access to data, all the way to when a user can actually ask a question. Are they actually basically trying to do prompt injection, or is the model giving them something trustworthy or not? This entire stack, people are, while they're building it, they are trying to embed security at all layers, actually within within the stack there, if they're building it themselves. And
Hmm.
if you're doing for SaaS, they want to make sure, employee focused applications that they use, typically SaaS applications, that they actually have a layer that can make sure the controls are fully in place. That's what we've seen. Both sides of the equation are very, very active.
Yeah, I think the thing is it's just super complicated. Like the process, the workflow, the people, the levels of the stack, like the amount of stuff you have to do to get your data ready just even get to this point. I think if you're looking at something other than Microsoft, to your point, or an app, but then even within that app, you would have kind of thought that some of these apps would have kind of solve this problem? Because they're at least marketing it. I think those companies are going to catch up quickly, but still, you're going to have the problem of sprawl, right? The problem of how do I manage all of this across everything, like you kind of said at the beginning, and then that's just structured data, right? Structured data is kind of the first place. The next place everyone's going to go is the level down, which is kind of the iceberg thing, all the way down to unstructured data. Maybe tell us a little bit about the types of business value you're seeing customers drive from AI. You're in a lot of projects, see all kinds of things. You see what customers are trying to do, you see what they actually execute on. You see, hey, we had this very lofty goal, but we still got a very tactical thing out of it, but it was still super powerful. Um,
Yeah.
kind of tell us kind of what you're seeing, because you're, as a security and governance vendor, you're sitting in between all of these ISVs, all of the data, all of the customers, the different types of customers, the CDO, the CISO, the CIO, architects. Like what are you start out saying, hey, this is a big problem, there's a lot of value here. What is some of the business value you're seeing? um, and it could be like a stat like, hey, they saw 15% productivity, but like, what does that actually mean? Or just enabling the business to do this is a huge benefit. Across 40,000 employees, and not everything can have a dollar price tag, but they can, hey, we made our employees' lives easier and the people want to work here. Or you helped me improve my processes, I had less people problems, or less like things drop because we have better process. Maybe walk me through some of the business value stuff you're seeing with customers.
Yeah, I think I'll give you a little story and then tell you different dimensions. I think late last year, CEO of a very large bank was in Silicon Valley, so I got invited to that dinner also. It was a very small setting, and people were asking questions. And frankly, my thought was when we went into it that it's going to be all about, like, he's going to talk about how economy is doing, and the big movers and shakers of the economy. There'll be a great place to actually ask questions from him.
Mhm.
And the very first question that one of the audience members asked, like, what is your top priority? And number one priority for the CEO of a very large bank was AI, right? And why is that? The way he's explained is that there are like 40,000, let's say, people who deal with customers, maybe more, right? Like enterprise side, just an enterprise. And and they deal with all kinds of information and unstructured data, and creating basically investment theses, and all that is all unstructured information that comes through. The way he explained it to say, look, even if I can just make them a bit more efficient and train them with it, or have a more structured way of doing things for them, where they have help, it's not just I'm going to save a lot of money, which I will. His whole thing was, I'm going to save $4 billion from it, right? I don't know what percentage is from the
Sure.
overall spend of that segment, but the experience that they can give to a customer will be much more consistent. The quality will be much higher, and we will be able to measure it, because in a different way, right? Because AI tools will also help you measure this. And so the entire focus was, this is like, if we don't do it right, we won't survive, right? Because somebody else will do it, right?
Yeah.
So if you take that, and what we're seeing across large companies now is pretty much every function, they have an aspiration to actually improve their operations, increase the quality, if nothing else. Start with that. Whether your coding is better coding, better testing in the coding side, better monitoring, so you have less bugs. People aren't trying to let go of their engineers. They're trying to just make sure that their code is faster development is happening, right? You take that to marketing. The content that goes out is like higher quality, faster pace, and it's much more relevant. You can take it to legal, your contracts, you're not missing out on things and all that. You're not making mistakes, which you should not have ever made mistakes. Can you compress the legal cycles, because now you have tools that can enable. You can apply your customer support instead of your customers waiting for an hour to get somebody on the call. Can you get basically somebody on the call as a bot, right? Or give them access to information that they can have a conversation with that, with an AI agent in a natural language. And of course, you can take that to very, very critical industries where, like healthcare, where people are trying to make sure that you have better quality of medicines, better quality of healthcare. quicker time to respond and all that. I mean, this revolution is unbounded at this point in time. And I know better models, cheaper models, models coming from China and other, it's all good news in some ways. Why? Because the amount of value you want to create at lower cost, and train these models faster in a much less costly way is actually good news for the entire industry, in the entire world. It's actually good news, right? So I think that's what we are seeing. The use cases are pretty much in every dimension of a company. We're seeing the use cases and application.
So I think that your comment about the bank CEO talking about AI, it's kind of like what everyone was saying, I don't know, 10 years ago around digital transformation for cloud. And then we moved on to data modernization and digital transformation, and now it's AI driving it. But I think to your point, this is kind of existential, right? This is not a
Yeah.
we're gonna have a better customer experience because it's a digital experience. Like this thing touches literally everything, and it includes all of the things that you should have already done, but like on exponentially, right? And it's going to enable you to do things you've never done before. It's funny your comment about being more accurate and being more, better processes. We were talking to a customer who's at an event with bank C levels. I don't exactly know what if they're CIOs or other CXOs, and the bank, all the banks were like, well, I saw that NVIDIA thing and I saw all this accuracy benchmarks and like it's only like 85% accurate. And the question is, well, how accurate are your people? How accurate is your process? You do not know. So how do you know that 85% is better or worse than what you currently have? So I think it's going to give us a whole nother level of tracking because we are going to now start to track how our processes and our people are doing in a much better way, but also giving visibility that everybody needs, right? That you can actually learn from and use this AI with your job, right? So I think it's a super interesting conversation because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, I'm not ready to do it." Like it's kind of like the self-driving car thing. Like the self-driving car got in one accident. Well, like I'm never going to use a self-driving car because they got in one accident. Well, how many accidents are there a day with people driving them? Like it's the same paradigm shift. It's a trust and it's a believing thing. And so I think we're working our way through it. I think we'll get there. But I think it's a super interesting comment you made because everyone is struggling with that right now, right? And I
When
think
you
at the
said
end
it
of the day, it's
right.
going to enable people, right? It's about people enablement, and if you do it right, you're going to execute, right? Go ahead.
Yeah,
What were you saying?
when you said it right, absolutely. For instance, like humans are also generative, and humans are also all kinds of ills that we think about in the AI that existed also. The flaws exist in all of us, and humans also. They talk about bias, talk about
Yep. Yeah.
being able to be manipulated, talk about their efficacy or their hallucination, or saying things that they actually don't know, but they will say it, right? And
Yeah.
but the big difference is here you can measure it and you can fix it. You can actually
That's right.
probably improve it. Certainly you can
Hmm.
improve it, which actually is in many cases it's just not possible for millions of humans to be actually, because that's not possible to actually go fix every human out there, right? But if you have a model where you can actually keep refining it, so for that you definitely need, I mean, of course, it opens up the issue of like who controls that model, what truly is inside it, and what is actually being done. So transparency
Hmm.
is super important, and
Hmm.
measurability on these very important aspects of these models are very, very important. But we're in the very, very early inning. I think it's and it's evolving very fast. But in this case, of course, you have an option to measure it and refine it, improve it on all these areas. Actually,
Yeah. Yeah. So I got two final questions, and then we'll wrap here. Um, to your point on the innings, if this is a 9-inning baseball game, what inning are we in? Are we in the bottom of the first inning? Are we at the top of the first? Are we in the second inning? What inning are we in AI? In Gen AI, sorry.
I, I think in Jenny, I probably in the not the first one, but maybe the first, second, or third. I think
Okay.
because a lot of evolution is a lot of things actually has happened.
Okay.
But it's very hard to I think it's very clear that the world is going to look very different in a couple of decades, right? It's going to look completely different because everything would have by that time were transformed. So, so which means we're definitely one of some of the early innings. Like impact we have not seen. Maybe the tech is actually underneath. Maybe it is maybe in the forward innings, but the impact, the adoption and impact, and we have not seen as yet fully of that, right? But the it's also is that how fast this is going.
Yep.
I can't remember, at least in my career. I mean, in front of us, a lot of things have changed. You know, phones didn't exist, and internet didn't exist, and the cloud didn't exist, and PCs didn't exist. And some of us who are, you know, maybe a little older, we have seen that transformation fast. But even with that, we have not seen this kind of a pace that is going on right now, right? So
Yep.
I think, which means, yes, we may be in the early innings, but things are going to change very fast.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great. I think we'd have a whole nother conversation about where our tech is versus where it needs to be. I think we should have that conversation, but we'll do that another time. That's a whole nother hour we're going to need. And then what about what's next in Gen AI or whatever you want to talk about? Like, you know, people are talking about agentic. Like you said, every investor is asking their startup to do something around agentic. Customers don't know what it is. The vendor community has gone from saying Gen AI to agentic, and now it's confusing everyone. Um, what's like what is the next thing that we should be talking about? Tell us about your perspective on agentic. You know, give us your last 2 cents here.
I think it is, of course, the term now, like this is the term to use, but the
That's
underneath
right.
what we people, so, maybe a different term in next year, right? But I think that the key thing is just like SaaS came revolutionized, like every function you have a SaaS application at some point that's what happened, right? I think it's simply, you can think of this way is that instead of having, you know, an automated way of doing the same function, call it agentic, right? Or give it a different name. But it is absolutely true is that the value actually relies on not necessarily the UI. The value doesn't rely necessarily on what model. I mean, model has a huge value, but model you can clearly say you can swap the models. The value for an enterprise relies on the data, right? What they can do with this data and how much they can derive a value in an automated fashion in a certain segment, and what automation they can do to take actions. Of course, the word used now is agentic, right?
Mhm.
But the underneath I would say the opportunity to change things and improve things and is no question they exist. Like there's no whatever term is getting used is fine. But the opportunity to actually disrupt, an opportunity to actually improve those domains, unquestionably they exist. And I think I'm glad that, you know, if the term is helping people to go figure it out, it's fine. But I think that's going to happen. Every domain will look very different the way it gets solved.
Yeah, 100%. We're doing agentic here, and you know, Gen AI is great, but it's very narrow, and very deep but narrow. So in order to kind of make a workflow or something that a human would need to use different parts of their brain and different expertise, you need to have these different AIs that can do those things, take it apart, put it back together, summarize it, put it back in something, ship it. You know, it's like a manufacturing line, right? So that's how we're using it, and it's pretty powerful because then you can scale your process and your workflow and your automation, right? So
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you there. I'm excited about it, even though it is a buzzword that everyone is using, and it's that's a whole nother conversation too. We'll have another one about that. So all right, Rehan. Well, thank you for joining. Great to hear from you and hear about your story. Super interesting to see what you're doing. I hope you stay in this market. I'm sure you're looking at another market that is nascent, that you can get ahead of and lead. But thank you for sharing your perspective here today.
Ben, it's a pleasure talking to you. This is a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time.